Good afternoon to you all for coming. Anybody who's here in person and anybody who's watching us on the live stream. Thank you to anybody who will be watching this later on. My name is Marcia Greenberg, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our celebration of Tulagi Place, the Instant City. This has been a wonderful collaboration, and I want to let you know a little bit about how we're going to use this time together. The plans for today are that first we'll hear a presentation from Julie King from St. Mary's College in Maryland, and we'll have a brief Q&A session afterwards so that things can sort of focus on exactly what she's been talking about. Then we'll have a presentation by John Cook, and similarly, there will be an opportunity for Q&A. Then we'll take a small break because our co-sponsors have very generously provided us with party refreshments. And it will also give you all, a chance to share some thoughts and to maybe trigger some memories. And then what we would like to do is to come back with the refreshments and have kind of an open mic session where people can use the time to share their memories of what Tulagi Place meant for them or for other members of their family. And that's really important. We just want to make sure that we all have that opportunity together. There is a sign-up sheet for anybody who's attending, and it includes an opportunity to tick a box if you'd like to speak today, or to tick a box if you think you would like to speak later, in case we have the opportunity to do some oral history recordings. We really want to make sure to get as much as we can from people who will paint the picture of their personal experience after we've heard the historical perspective. I'd like to start to make sure that since we have a wonderful group of co-sponsors, that any of the co-sponsors who would like to welcome everybody would also come here and make some brief remarks about what this means and why they are co-sponsored. And we'll start with St. Mary's Library.
Greetings, welcome. A couple of housekeeping things from the library. It started, just should we have any kind of emergency, we have emergency doors to our left and to our right. On the street behind us, restrooms are just on the hallway to the left. Please take a break at any time if you'd like to. The Lakeside Park Library started in that space of Tulagi Square, so we are very interested, of course, in the history and happy to bring any kind of local history to light here through the library. So I encourage you to take a look online later on at our YouTube channel. We're recording this session and some of the memories here today. Thank you all so much for coming and being able to share those.
And our thanks to Amy for not only co-hosting, but for all of the setup with technology. Secondly, our co-sponsors include the UCAC, the Unified Committee for African American Contributions, and the NAACP, and Janice Wallflower is at the whole.
Just welcome everybody and thank you for coming today. Our president, Nathaniel Lawrence of the Unified Committee for African American Contributions is here as well. I wore the hat for UCAC for the most part, and the NAACP as we embarked on this venture, and now we're able to really start this whole conversation that talks about the history and culture of Lexington Park, which is in St. Mary's County. And this is going to be, I think, a wonderful adventure and experience for us all. You know, the UCAC has the African American Monument right on Tulagi Place, and it is a prime place for it. And it was the first of its kind in St. Mary's County. So it's a treasure to the county. And this today is really, as I said, it's a great experience. I wish the room was full. Thank you.
Okay, it's a great number of co-sponsors. The Ascension, the Church of the Ascension, St. George's is also a co-sponsor. I don't believe anybody's here to represent them. Is anybody here? Do you like them? Well, you're from the church. Okay, well, thank you for joining us. The Historic Preservation Commission, anybody like to speak on behalf? Thank you. I don't think the sponsor are providing some of the goodies that we're going to part of our art.
I'm Terry Wilson. I'm the chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission, and we were involved in some of the activities surrounding the Royal Farm situation and the future of this area. And so we really effervescent supported the evanescent. So we try to stay in fight as much these types of things, and I'm very encouraged that oral history will preserve some of these memories, because the physical parts of these big things are passing away. We really need to use the oral history to record the important story of the development of the plan. Thank you.
And our last two co-sponsors are current residents of Tulagi Place, and therefore they get involved right now in current life there. So we want to thank the Oasis Center, Pastor Spence, who on Sunday is ministering. And we also want to thank Linda Kolchinsky. We hope will join us in a little while, but she said it's been a busy day at the restaurant. She needs to close things up. And she also has provided some of our refreshments. So we had a wonderful group of co-sponsors, and we thank all of them. Before we begin the program, life is constantly taking unexpected turns, and we have comings and goings, and we have joy, and we have loss. And so we'd like to just spend one moment remembering somebody from our community who is dedicated to the history of this community. And so just spend one moment for those of you who knew him to remember Pete Himmelhaber, a man who is respected throughout our community for his dedication to our history. Just a moment to remember. So, as we think of the past, as we're together in the present, we imagine the future, I'd like to present Julie King. She really doesn't need any introduction in this community. I think there's hardly anyone who doesn't know of all the work she's done for us and for others. And that includes educating not only the students at St. Mary's College, but all of us. Julie has been an avid supporter of all of our efforts to preserve the past and to make that past be part of our future. And so without further ado, Professor Julie King.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? And I'm wondering if we could get the lights. Is it possible to get the lights down? And so thank you for that great introduction, Marcia, and thank you all for turning out today on a beautiful Sunday. It's a little bit nippier than it was. And I want to introduce myself by the fact that I actually came to St. Mary's County. I came here very quickly for school, and then I came back in 1982, and then I stayed. And so part of the history that I'm going to talk about today, I really didn't experience. But my husband and a lot of his friends and other community members, including Johnny Cook, who you'll be hearing from in a minute, did experience it. And I was just mesmerized by this history, both for its very local flavor, for its regional flavor, for its statewide flavor. And I really believe that we can make an argument for its national significance. St. Mary's County was a very different place in 1941. Than it was after 1942, after the base came in 1942. And I think that this idea of the Instant City is certainly not mine. It goes back with, I think it's called Creative Arts Forum that was around in the 70s. And this was a poster that they put up. And this poster was about, I think it was in 1976. Yeah, I can't say. And so Charlie Hewitt, who was an artist who grew up here in Sound, New York, really wanted to use art to think about what the changes were that were going on here. So when I was cleaning out my husband's uncle's
stuff in this old abandoned house, I found all these posters. And some of them had a little bit of boxing, but most of them were in really good shape. And I took them and I donated them to St. Mary's College because I felt that they needed to be recorded. So anyway, and of course, for a long time, I was involved with the Slackwater Project down at St. Mary's. That I have now turned the reins over to that work. Jerry Gabriel has taken the reins of the Slackwater Project. It rotates among people. And so he's back in the English department. It was born with Andrea Hammer. And I know many of you know her. She created this extraordinary oral history archive. One of the things, or two of the volumes that came out, one was under Andrea, that's the one on the left, that's about Cedar Point. And then the second one on the right is the Instant City. And that came out when I was in charge of Slackwater. And I actually have some copies today that I am happy to give to you. And if I don't have enough, I'm happy to take your name and send you copies. The host of Slackwater is at St. Mary's. We do more than just Lexington Park. We do all sorts of places in the county. And for those of you who are interested in more about it, there is a website, smcm.edu/Slackwater. And I can also put you in touch with Dr. Gabriel. The term comes, it's a Waterman's term that basically means that moment when the tides are turning. This is an image that was taken by Andrea Hammer, who now is at Cornell University. But she really created and gave this extraordinary gift to the county. And you can actually go online and there are searchable oral histories. Thanks to the labor of our students, these tapes have been transcribed. They've been digitized. The actual oral history tapes are online, as are the transcriptions. If you can search in the box, you can search things like Thanksgiving, which is coming up, to see how people throughout the 20th century may have celebrated, or all sorts of other events that are related to St. Mary's. And you can see here some of the oral histories that have come up. And this is Marvin Mandel, and some of you have been around know Marvin Mandel's connection to St. Mary's College. And of course, I wasn't here in that time, but I grew up in Anne Arundel County, and my father was very involved with Governor Mandel. And so I knew all about the Utsi moving to the hotel. Does anybody remember that, or is it just me? Nobody remembers Governor Mandel and Steve, you know. But this is a fabulous interview. All the interviews actually with Slackwater are fabulous. And it really it goes to the heart of this very rural community, a very poor rural community, that the housing stock had not changed since the Civil War by the early 20th century. And in fact, you can see that the population was about the same as it was at the end of the Revolutionary War. This is usually not something that you want for a community, right? You want your community to grow. And sort of out of the split because of the light over here, but you can see in 1790, it's only 16,000 people, goes up a little bit, and by 1940, it's down to almost 14,000 people. And then, of course, that changes after 1941. You can just look at this histogram, and you can see, whoa. And a lot of that happened. The population almost doubled in that decade after 1942. And so, of course, this is going to create all sorts of challenges for a rural community as it starts being brought, kicking and screaming with some justification, into the modern world. And St. Mary's, that story of St. Mary's is really important. And then you can also see, I'm going to grab my water. You can see population by race, because opportunity was not necessarily that great for people of color. And so you see the corresponding throughout the country with what's known as the Great Migration to urban areas. Now, this is an aerial photo that was taken, I think, in 1937. And this is the area of Tucson Urban Naval Air Station at that date. And you can see it is all farmland. And it's some of the best farmland in the county. Was and still is some great soils out there. So actually, do I say it's 1940? Yeah, you know.
And this is actually a U.S. Coast and Geodetic survey map. It was done in 1848. And this, you can get a copy of this over at Calvert Marine Museum. They were thinking of where they were going to locate the naval facilities that actually ended up down in Virginia Beach, which now are under all sorts of pressure because of rising sea level. But they considered the mouth of the Patuxent at that time. This was not a new idea. And you can see that they not only mapped the water or the shoreline, but they also mapped some of the places. And let's see if I can do this. Tanya, do you have your, you can see Susquehanna where it says Carroll, and you can see the house there. And let's see if I can make this thing work. Will it work? You know, just the way the light's sitting here, I just cannot see it. So I'll just leave this here. Anyway, it's Susquehanna again. Yeah, you can put in Susquehanna. So the Carroll family. And then over to the left is Mattapan, which is known as Quarters A. And it was, and I think it still remains, the home of the Admiral. But this was really good for when I was working on a project that did involve Susquehanna. Of course, Pearl Harbor changes everything. And these are some images that I was able to pull off the internet about Pearl Harbor. And a lot of the oral histories that we have memories about Pearl Harbor. Just like for my generation, I remember I was a little kid, but I remember when Kennedy was shot. All of us probably remember 9/11. Well, Pearl Harbor, of course, was the same kind of event. And you can see Jane Iwowski saying when Pearl Harbor happened, everyone remembers where they were. It was a Sunday afternoon. And you see this, if you search Pearl Harbor in oral histories, you see this. And then this one I really thought was interesting because J. Frank Raley said that they were listening to the radio. So here's men in a rural Minnesota household listening to the radio on December 7th, 1941. And so everybody was getting this information a lot faster than they might have even a few decades earlier. Susquehanna was my sort of first introduction to the base. This house was purchased by a guy named Young is his last name. And he was in Michigan and he had married a woman from St. Mary's County. And by this point, this house is being used to store grain. A lot of people thought that this house was a 17th century house. We now know that this house dates probably to about the 1830s. It's a little bit more recent. But you can see it. And it's been taken to the Henry Ford Museum where you can go and see it today. And many of you may have already gone and seen this amazing house. And they had hired me as an archaeologist to go out there and sort of test around the area to give them information for their museum exhibits. These are some of the kinds of things that you see. You've got an auction coming up because the people at Susquehanna Farms, you see down there at the bottom, they have to move. And they don't know of places where they're going to move that can take everything that they need. I have some quotes that I'll read to you in a minute. And then you see a blow up of it. National Defense takes Susquehanna Farms, so we must sell at auction. There was a war, and that was that. In some ways, there was a resignation by the people who had to leave their properties, and then there were many people who had to leave. And I'll read you some of those quotes in a minute. But this is a particular individual who had recently got a loan. This is John Dyson. He had recently got a loan from the Farm Security Administration. So the FSA sent somebody down to photograph him. And John Dyson, those of you know Webster Dyson, that was his grandson. And here he is at his house with his wife, Louise. And I recently saw pictures of this actually on the Facebook page for Lexington Park. And these images are in the Library of Congress. And while they didn't have a whole lot of money, he had an orchard. He sold to hotels in the area. And this is the little house that they had. And I think you'll probably see it in John and Eve's book. And of course, that image came out of Calvert Museum. And there was Louise Dyson in the house. And, you know, as an archaeologist, he's really interested in material culture. I mean, this is a very loaded image, right? You can see all sorts of things here. Let me read you just some of the quotes of the people who had to move. I won't go on for too long, but here's Richard Mattingly.
He says, I'll tell you how fast it was. Pearl Harbor was the 7th of December 13th. We had a notice with a 20-penny nail driven through it right to the front door of our house. It was about this thick and had everybody's name listed, the farm they own, the persons that lived there, and everything. You will vacate this property by the 17th of April, 1942. George Purcell says, that was the first we knew. We saw the surveyors when they came down. That was during the Christmas holidays, the last of December in 41. The surveyors came down and then this notice was tacked to our door, on everybody's door, one day by the marshal. We didn't have time to prepare for anything. They gave you 30 days to get out and then they took over. And then on the Slackwater webpage, you can read the story of the granddaughter of John Dyson. And it is really a very poignant, it's very hard to read because as George Wald said in another communication, if you have a lot of money, if you were at Susquehanna or you at Burt High, you could fight. But if you didn't have a lot of resources, black and white, you could not fight. You know, you just didn't have it. You had to take what the government gave you. Of course, today it's very different. And there he is playing his accordion. And his granddaughter in the oral history talks about how he would always play the tune Lonesome Road. And so here is, he exists in the census. And the census, of course, you can get access to those through the St. Mary's County Library through its Psychic Heritage Quest line. And of course, people had to move to make room because the country was now at war. And you can see some of these earlier constructions underway at the Tuxet River. And so here's that aerial again, that 40. And here it is a few years later. And you can see where over by where that basin is, you can just see a very different landscape. And in fact, when I was working with the base and they were doing some oral histories, pilots would take off out of Andrews and look for the cloud of dust and head in that direction because that's where the Tuxet River was. Can you imagine trying to get away? I mean, today we have the trucks that spray the water and everything, but it must have been something to be able to see it up in the air from that perspective. And then the population by 1950, I'm just having a real challenge here with site today. So anyway, you can see it almost doubles. And where are you going to put these people? And many of you, I bet, in the audience are people who came during that time. And there's some great stories about living in basically what are tractor trailer containers and, you know, just finding a home where you could make a home. And you'll hear more about Tulagi from John Cook in this area, but these are some of the buildings that were there. There was a trailer park. People would come in with their trailers, and in fact, trailers are a big thing in St. Mary's County. I've tried to work with the Maryland Historical Trust to do an inventory of trailers because they weren't just inexpensive housing. They represent the automobile, and they became a way for people to live in the county at a time where it was just the housing stock hadn't grown since the Civil War. And the Navy comes to realize this. And the Navy goes and creates, you can see Lexington Park and vicinity, about where the Kmart is, you can see the flat tops, and we'll talk about it in a minute, Carver Heights. And so here's Cedar Park Trailer Town. And then this is Pete Himmelhaber, who Marcia had mentioned earlier, who actually grew up with Eve and who's here and his brothers and sisters, I think in the flat tops, right? I mean, and we interviewed him because when the flat tops were torn down, I can't remember when. I'm having a tough time with dates today, aren't I? I teach history. And so when the flat tops were torn down, the county was required to, because it was federal funding, the county was required to undertake oral histories. And so I worked with the county, economic development, Hans Welsh, and we did a number of oral histories with county residents. And then we hired a photographer to take images of the people who had been interviewed, doing what they wanted to be remembered by. And also you have, this is the flat tops. And the flat tops here, there's one that survives over at at the Lexington Manor area now, and in fact, I think it is the UCAC, the Civil War Museum, the Colored Soldiers Museum. And this image comes out of the Maryland Historical Trust. And this architecture, and Johnny will tell you a little bit about it, was just like, nobody's seen anything like this before in the county. It was straight out of nowhere, you know, at least for people who had lived in the county. And then we also have Carver Heights. And Carver Heights, we don't hear as much about, but we really should. We really need to think about how we're going to record the history. We have some of that history, but not nearly in the way that we do with the flat tops because of the demolition of the flat tops. We know that, well, you saw earlier the chart where African American people left the county in droves. We do have places like the Drayton School, but we have to remember that this period, it is still segregated. It is still segregated, so Carver Heights is the housing for people of color, for African Americans. And this was, some of you may know Jay Fleming, who's now a pretty renowned photographer over on the Eastern Shore, but he took a Slackwater class from us, and what he did was he went around to a number of the stores in the county, and he took pictures of images, or took pictures of places that were where colored people would enter. And so you can see that many of these doors are now boarded up, but that they're still there. They're still there in the landscape. They were at the hospital, they were at bars, they were at taverns, they were at theaters. And Fred Hallberg, who is Janice Wolfhard's and Alfreda Mathis's dad, had come here, I think, in the late 40s or early 50s. And he actually is quoted as saying that it was from Arkansas, if I recall correctly, that it was worse in St. Mary's County. And he made it his mission, right, to try to deal with this. And he started a program of asking people to desegregate institutions. And that is an amazing oral history, really interesting. Some businesses did, other businesses closed down their lunch counter. Patuxent Park begins at the end of the 1940s. A lot of people left the flat tops and went over to Patuxent Park. Here's a close-up, and this is where I know my husband's family went to after the flat. There was an effort to try residents to try to purchase the flat tops, but it didn't work, and so people went to Patuxent Park. And the family still owns a house there. The Enterprise. I remember when I was going through the Enterprise and I found this editorial, and this editorial I think is in 1957, and it's called "Memo to Another Generation." And as I was reading it, I was like, "Oh my God, they're writing to me." And when I brought it up, it says, then came the second wave of immigration to St. Mary's County. And I think that this is a really important point to make, because whenever we think of historic places, we think of St. Mary's City. I live in St. Mary's City. I love St. Mary's City. It's a very historic area. But it really was a wave of immigration from Europe. And then almost 300 years later, there's a second wave of immigration. And the Enterprise reader, or the Enterprise writers, have picked up on that. The history books may not note the establishment of the Patuxent Naval Air Station. They're already speaking like, I see ya, in the cornfields near Cedar Point in 1942. In fact, it is entirely possible that this air station, now one of the most important ones in the world, will be cornfields again. But we all know that that's probably not true, although every few years we get scared by Brack, right? So we start to try to figure out what it is that the Navy wants so that we can keep the place going. And so in comes J. Frank Raley, who becomes elected as, I think, first a delegate and then a senator. And he leads the charge to begin to really modernize St. Mary's County. Now, at the very end, I have an image that I'm going to show you. And we were like Somerset County on the Eastern Shore. Malaria was still an issue in early 20th century St. Mary's County. And the arrival of the naval base sets this county on a trajectory that Somerset County never had the benefit for. You can really see that in the numbers today, and I'll have that at the very end. And these individuals were the architects of the modernization
pulling St. Mary's County into the modern world. First out goes slots. There's a whole story on slots in St. Mary's County. Go to the archives. And a woman in Charles County did a really excellent program on slot machines and their end. But they go out, and of course, new things have to come in to replace them. And this is Governor Tall signing the legislation that get rid of the slots. The problem with the slots is that there was no way to account for the amount of money that was flowing, so that the taxes that were paid were not enough to support the community. And of course, if you have the Navy, you want the Navy to know that you're supporting the community, and that was just not happening. Because a lot of the churches were worried about the moral implications of gambling. Some of the oral histories are describe people who would get their paycheck on base, and then it would be gone a couple days later. The bridge comes in, and of course, the bridge at that time was just an amazing piece of architecture, bridge architecture. And we also start to get Top Point, we get Morgantown, and this is not just St. Mary's County, this is the Southern Maryland region. We get Calvert Cliffs. And one of the ways I thought about this is that not only do we get all this immigration, but that we were still seen as kind of this colony, right? You know, like a colony, you take your tobacco out of the colony and you ship it to Europe back in the colonial period. Well, now what you have are people are generating electricity here and then shipping it out. And that still occurs, but this was happening in the 70s. This would never happen today. And in fact, you guys are probably familiar with the refinery that was slated for Piney Point. And this comes out of the Senator Paul Bailey collection. He helped lead the charge against that, and he donated, or his family donated those materials to the college. And there were a number of people who really rose up to fight the refinery. Stewart was already there. There was already some concerns with the oil spills and leaks with the refinery. People were describing it as being just like Bayonne on the Potomac. And there were all sorts of bumper stickers that came out. It was an epic fight, and it took years. It got beaten down once, and then it came back. But this is all part of that sort of, you know, we can put these kinds of resources down there, and because we're treating it as a colony. And then, of course, you've got this instant city that has grown up here by the 70s, where you have a lot of people, the world is changing. 70s are also a really remarkable time in the nation's history. Segregation has been made illegal. Women's rights are on the docket. There's a whole lot going on, and you've got people who are down here, a really interesting, committed community, some of them based out of the college, some of them coming out of the Creative Arts Forum, that are trying to think about, what does this mean for this place? What does all of this change and this rapid change mean? And Charlie Hewitt, here's a picture, a more modern picture of him, but he led that panel discussion. And it was really interesting because not only did you have sort of these younger artists, but you had old timers, you had many people from the community, regardless of their political background, who were there trying to make sense of what was going on in St. Mary's County. Do y'all remember the Save-On gas station? Yeah. So Charlie, one of the things that they did, and I don't want to say it was Charlie, but he was the leader of the organization. Let's go out and try to make this place beautiful, even though it's sort of what we might call today sprawl development. And both of these images, I think, can be traced to Sue Jones, who was an artist at the college, but who created these images of Save-On. And Lynn Irwin subsequently wrote a little essay about what Save-On meant to the county. It's gone now. And Save-On still exists. I think that the gas station is actually owned by the Seneca Nation in New York. At least that's what I could find about it. But you can see how people were really thinking about what does this mean, and how can we make what maybe on an initial look looks ugly, how can we make it look beautiful? And then, of course, this image, I found this in the Calvert Marine Museum's archives. And this is actually an image that was taken by the State Highway Administration. And as you know, they're putting that last span up. And this is going to change everything. It's going to open St. Mary's in Calvert County. It's going to change, well, everything had been changing everything, but this was yet another piece of that puzzle. And so I don't have any of the images, but Creative Arts Forum, they went over and they painted this building, this bridge under construction. And here you can see a close up of that. And I think that the image sort of faded over time, so it looks historic. I don't think the State Highway Administration intended for it to be. In fact, when I called them to get permission to use it, they had to dig all over the place to even find it. I guess they're not in archives. So this is sort of my last slide, and it kind of gives you a sense of what's going on in St. Mary's, Montgomery County, and Somerset County. And you can see that in many ways, and some people might say this would have been a good thing, that we could still be like Somerset County if the Navy had not arrived. St. Mary's County and Somerset County were very similar before the 1940s. You look here and we have like 5 times the amount of population. The building permits at 359 compared with 62. And by the way, 10 years ago in 2012, those building permits were 750. I didn't include them on here because I didn't want to make this a really jammed image. The median household income, we are a wealthy county. The median household income, $95,000, $45,000 in Somerset County. And of course, we're closing in on Montgomery County, which we consider one of the richer counties in the nation, $112,000. The homeownership rate is at 70% here. It's a little less in Somerset, Montgomery County. And our poverty rate is a little bit higher than Montgomery County's, but we tend to be resistant to any kind of recession. But you can see almost a quarter of the population was in poverty in Somerset County. This is not my last slide, but it's my next to last slide. And I just thought it was this great quote out of the Oral Histories. And it's Alonzo Gaston. St. Mary's County, if I walk into a store and say hello, you know, I want to have a half a dozen people say hello to me. And in St. Mary's County, you'd much rather wave or say hello to somebody that you don't know than to miss somebody that you do know. I just wave going down the road. And my friends say, well, who is that? I don't know. I'm not sure. It's just, you know, somebody. And the people wave back. And in many ways, when I came in 82, I saw this part of St. Mary's County, even before I met my husband or some of these amazing people involved in the Creative Arts Forum. And I thought, this is a really great place. It's like Anne Arundel County was when I was growing up. So at any rate, I want to thank you all for your attention. And I thank you for coming out this afternoon. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any of them. So thank you. In a way, I feel like you guys are like, girl, we can tell you. No, rather than me tell you. But at any rate, thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest maybe helpful after his presentation, sort of see that all as one holistic piece, and then that's some other questions as well. But just I'd like to recognize Julie Cook for having put together a lot of materials that she was prepared to present at public hearings. And since the public hearing in July didn't happen and the public hearing in August didn't happen, we're delighted to have this opportunity to benefit from her expertise and get a sense of history. And the same thing for John Cook, who's now going to present another piece of the puzzle. Thank you again, Julie.
I think I told most of you, there's a book floating around, and my wife Eve and I keep it going. I don't need it, but it's kind of what got me going on this new information. It's all the condemnation appraisals of all the properties that were on the base, and photographs of every single structure that was on the base. And so it kind of spun off into this, and I'll be talking about this gentleman, but Eli Kahn, architect, New York architect, is about the designer of, the core of the residential units in Bugsy Park. So I'll pass that on. Well, thank you for having me. I like Julie, I had this plan for the county commissioners. Uh, I'm glad to do it for you. Remember this building, shape, it doesn't look like anything you've probably seen before. It's called Notre Dame du Pot in France. It was designed by a man named Le Corbusier. You might have heard. But, Julie took a hit on most of what to do the first couple slides, but St. Mary's County hadn't changed much in the 20s and 30s in 100 years. Here we go. Residential fish, oysters, that's what it was. Primarily, though, I want to talk about the Naval Air Station, which was the finest land probably in the state of Maryland, and the waters around. It was sassafras loam, and on your soil max, it's 15. Great. Years ago, several years ago, we did a thing with Barbara Ives at the museum, the Navy Museum, and who was it? John Dawson, who was evicted from the base and was a farmer. And I said, you know, I really didn't see much tobacco on that base because we didn't plant it, it cured green. So it was the soil was so good they didn't plant or very little use. But farming was the base was best. This picture here, I got this, had this for a while. That's the first Mennonite in St. Mary's County. And that's 1939. One phrase that goes around a lot from the old timers that I guess are not even here. We didn't have any money before the Depression. We didn't have any money during the Depression, and we didn't have any money after. So that's St. Mary's County. Of course, Pearl Harbor changed that. And the Navy base, like Julie had said, the Navy knew about the space for one thing, and they needed an air base, and it's perfect. Peninsula, you know, you could build runways and catch all the different directions of the wind, but that hollow in there is very deep. And when the Navy took it, one of their plans was to have an area where carriers could come in and unload planes. Of course, they didn't do that, but I think in 1848, the Coast Survey, they wanted, the Navy was considering building, taking that property then, they went down and did Norfolk instead. So, these are some of the properties that were on the air station. And in in the New Deal, Roosevelt started, one of the programs he started was the United States Housing. And after World War I, architects kind of blamed themselves for the social ills and the slums that were in the states and cities, and they really wanted to make a concerted effort to eradicate slums. And this was one of FDR's big deals. So he formed the United States Housing Authority. And the architects were all on board of the country. And so the Housing Authority was going to tackle them, slumber. But by 1937, everybody knew there was a war coming on. And they shifted gears and they renamed it. And it turned into an agency that would make low low interest loans to people for housing. But their primary thing was they were going to relocate thousands of people to prepare for the war effort. They one of the sites was taking 4,000 people, moving them to some remote place in New York, and turning the steel plant. Might have turned out a few rail ties and whatever, and into building components for tanks. This was going on all over the country, and the housing authority at this time had a gentleman. You see in this book, his name is Eli Kahn. He was from a firm called Kahn and Jacobs, and he was an architect that was. I'll talk about it later. Anyway, so the housing authority by 1940 had 585 projects like Lexington Park, and they constituted about 171,000 units in 37 states. So this was a major operation. And well, on the board was a gentleman, Eli Kahn. And these are some of the houses that were on in Susquehanna. And in that book, you can also see. Hey, this is what they were tackling. We wanted to get rid of the slums, but and after 37, they concentrated their efforts in relocating people. This is just a sample of the people that look like they weren't so lucky to have a nice town. I think I don't know where that is. That's what the housing is. This is the gentleman. The name's Eli Kahn, and FDR put him on the board of the housing authority. And even though he was trained and successful in the 19th century with the architecture called Beaux-Arts. Beaux-Arts was very lots of ornamentation, classical columns, lots of Corinthian columns, that sort of thing. And that's what he was trained in. But by the time he finished his career, he was a full-fledged modernist. You can see some of his structures that he was famous for. He was a very preeminent architect of commercial buildings, and he was about the most prolific architect in New York City. The gentleman that wrote that book, John Stewart, I got to become friends with, and he said in his book, he said that Kahn's buildings helped define the rugged skyline of New York as one of the most recognized symbols of American democracy and free enterprise today. When the skyscraper first became an item, they were tall and flat, and what they realized then was that they didn't let any sunlight in. And so New York City had what they call a setback, which created a new form of architecture. You can see that after so many stories, you step back. So this was his forte. Some of his structures, about the time the base was going on, actually he got the base. I mean, I'm sure he did. He was chairman of the board. He got 2 contracts. Now, why would he take something like Lexington Park and there was another one in New York? Is because he had about lost his shirt in the Depression. When he had over 100 employees before the Depression, he was down to about 3. And so these government contracts were very lucrative. He was awarded Lexington Park and in the town of the New York Steel Plant. The United Housing Authority purchased the land, contracted the architect. So he did not get his pen out and do Lexington Park. He spent most of his time with the housing authority, making sure that a lot of the modernist ideas in architecture were applied to the different projects across the country. He took a partner in named Robert Allen Jacobs to create. It was customary, or it happened, where somebody, an established famous architect that was broke, would usually bring a young man, a young architect that has some money into the firm. This is what happened to Robert Jacobs. Now, this is a little different. Robert Allen Jacobs had worked with Le Corbusier, and he was a dyed-in-the-wool modernist. I mean, when I talk about modernists, I don't know, not many people, I was included. One thing about these things is you learn so much. One of the things I learned about modernism, there's Bauhaus, there's international style, and all kinds of things. But Corbusier was an international style architect. But look at so Robert Jacobs, he came to the firm with this background and knowledge. And you can almost recognize a little bit of the flat tops in some of these things. Well, and so he got the firm took on Mexican Park. Now, I'm good. You got everything, right? You good? Okay. Reference points. Here's Coral Drive. Okay. Now, Great Mills Road and the firehouse would be right about there. Now, Great Mills Road is still there, the original Great Mills Road. It's all kind of overgrown, but it goes from the firehouse over to the round building in St. Annie's. And it's still overgrown, but you can probably still walk down. It went there. Where you guys, the cauliflower, you guys, everybody remembers where the Plaza movie theater and that complex is right next to here. So Tulagi Place is not quite built as it was right there. And there's the intersection, the Great Mills Road went down. Okay, and then the main gate is right in here. And that's the base, that's 235. Cedar Park Trail Camp, and if you can barely see it, but it's the community building is at Cedar Park. And Southwell and Lay Drive, and Lay. Now, the names of these Tulagi Place, this was the first section of the Blacktop Hill. All those names came from battles in the South Pacific, or important places up to the Battle of Coral Sea. Not quite midway. So Tulagi, those of you who don't know, is a little island in the Solomon's Island chain. And before the war, Tulagi was the capital of the Solomon's Island. You cross the Sound and you have Guadalcanal Canal. Now, Tulagi was a nice little island with a nice deep water protected harbor. The Japanese had it. It was a seaplane base. So when we invaded, we took it over and put a PT boat base, and that's where John Kennedy first had a job. Recently in the news, the Chinese wanted to sign a 99-year lease with Tulagi, perfect base, Navy base, and they evidently had to turn it down. So, yeah, Con and Jacobs, back to Con and Jacobs. They and Robert Jacobs, they got Lexington Park. And so before the war, before the war, there was a large influx of refugees. Now, two of these people were very famous architects in Germany, in Berlin. And when Hitler came in, they didn't want to be there anymore. They were fortunate and they got out. One was Erich Mendelsohn, and 2 was Elsa Guidoni. So Eli Kahn in New York City, uh, Eric Mendelson, he was, I don't know if anybody's heard Bauhaus movement, what Gropius, that they were friends, partners, and did a lot of work together. But Eric Mendelson also was very, very important in the Art Deco movement and these, they call streamline modern. And we know it as anything that looked like an airplane, your toasters, your Ford, your cars, that's this guy right here. And Elsa had done a lot of work in Berlin, and they got out. And so Eli Kahn said, come on, I'll give you some office space and get you guys going in here. You can have Lexington Park. Okay? And so I just bumped into this stuff and talking to the author. He said he didn't do Lexington Park. The guy that wrote this book on that. He just had too much other things to do, and his focus was primarily in New York City. So anyway, these two, I think, get it. And see if you agree with me. And here's some of Eric Mendelssohn's work. If you look at this building, this is a synagogue in Missouri. He did this a few years after the war. And doesn't that look like Milton Hillman's drugstore, Mark Miller's things, without the columns? Okay? You've got to understand that, when you call something modern, it might not look exactly like that because, in Lexington Park, they were only allowed to use wood and block, And when they built the flat tops, they had to use a lot of primitive building methods, and because you say you couldn't spend money on steel, you couldn't spend money on, a lot of things. And so all the flat tops, instead of lintels over openings, they were arches. You could do that. So the steel went to the thing. These are some of the. This is called expressionism. This is Eric Mendelssohn. So I kind of think that it takes ideas, like anybody, and carries them on. Maybe he took his work here in the park and used a little idea later. He was involved in Bauhaus, which is kind of a catch-all thing, but a lot of people think modernism when they think of Bauhaus, but it was a school in Germany, and the Nazis shut it down. But it was like our arts and crafts movement here. In fact, the arts and crafts kind of followed suit, and they wanted to unite all the arts under one group. So now, the Bowman flag. This is when the Navy got rid of the this Bowman flag, 1948. It's what was there, and so I think that Eric Mendelssohn did this. I know he did. The Kahn and Jacobs did this building. I think the second phase of the flat top firm just did that, but they pretty much copied what Kahn and Jacobs already done. That I'll get to, but this most of you remember, but you probably don't, and I'll get to that. But this was our community building. Movies, the offices, classes. I think that this was a standalone. See, that was by itself. It wasn't until the Navy squad, because they said, you got to get these civilians out of our commissary. We're trying to secure the gate, and we can't, because everybody that lived in the flat top had to go into the base right on the early part and grocery shop. And so they built this next to that building, and it's A&P, and Mr. Aschenbeck. Aschenbeck had been a, A&P employee, and he was our first grocer. Um, So this is a picture I had. This was in a Post article in Washington Post, 1950. And the other picture I don't have, but the article had Jack Doherty with his arms folded, and it said the only people that aren't making it in this town is the Undertaker. But if you look, there's your community building. Now, those of you who remember it, there's your post office. These two, this side is the post office, and this side was Miss Canetti and the public library. Okay, this was the standalone piece, and then these land visits here. The Western Auto was the first place that Jack Doherty opened his sports center and merchandise mall. And whenever he left the building, Bill Chapman came to the building, something, whether it be a gas station. And then later, Harold just came in here. But right at the get-go, Con and Jacobs was developing a community and using modernist theories. And And so you've got the shed type roof here, and simple shapes, modernism, simple shapes, lots of glass, lots of light, interaction with nature, okay, in this case, and so you'll see this. The temporary housing was Cedar Park Trailer Camp. And you guys, you don't know where it's, that's that big parking lot, below the Belvedere. That's now, this is then. Connie Jacobs was a trailer camp, designed that as a place to live until the flat tops were finished. So everybody lived in that. I think they does that down in mid-60s. But Nicolette, if you go up here, this would be where the skateboard park. So, big thing about modernism is not so much architecture, it's building a sense of community. Okay, and I wish they would do this now. All the churches took turns initially with worshiping, and this is the community building. Community building is centered to anything a modernist will do, or Connie Jacobs. And this is a picture of Chuck Doherty going in for the church ascension. But what you got to notice is, yeah, he's taking this turn, but if you look up here, there's the Star of David. And the Jewish faith would come in at a different hour and use it until they built the synagogue, the Gilberts in the Sack. But this was a big thing. And just imagine if you did that now, how maybe the world would. And there's Chuck Doherty. And the other church, I know the Baptist, they could use that. Methodist, that's what I meant. Thank you. Yeah, in fact, I have Eve's mother, this Himmelhaber, we have a kind of a sheet that explains what's going to happen that week at the community center. Again, and I think this Taylor, I hate to do this. Frank Odd, our first postmaster. Do you remember? Frank Odd, Lanny's room. Yeah, and so Mr. Odd was the kind of kicked off the base. he built the thing, but he was our first postmaster. And somebody told me once, he said, man, once the government came in, Frank Odd made $1.25 an hour. And everybody said, Frank Odd's a millionaire. Anyway, and the post office later moved it down the street, and the library took over that until the new. And here's the flat tops, Connie Jacobs or Mendelssohn. Small windows in the shed, down here. These, for those of you who don't remember, these are the coal bins. We probably showed them some coal. I don't know when they turned into diesel or fuels, but these were the simple structures, and you don't get there. Simple shades, lots of light. This is modernism. This is the living room. I have pictures later on. This picture is just to show how they relied on simple planes and lots of glass. Now, this I found, some of this stuff I've been, somebody asked me, somebody challenged what I was saying and stuff. And they said, well, how come we never heard about it before? How come, I don't believe this, I've never heard of this. Well, it's because it's been in the box up in the warehouse since 1941. And so once you start digging around, the Syracuse University sent me a bunch of that they had. And those because Robert Allen Jacobs donated his papers to them. I had not been, and the last stop would be, even I'm going to go to Columbia University in New York, because that's where the firm comes, Jacobs. And hopefully I could really nail down Mendelssohn's contribution for this. But one thing, can't see it, this is a very good picture. This is the concept map of the first stage of the flat top. One thing that you do see, and this was evidence that is right here, okay? There's a building that's just like the one I said, I think Mendelssohn did, the drugstore, pharmacy, just like it. But if you had a building that had lots of glass, wouldn't you want a southern exposure and maybe move it over here where I think it is? It's just my guess. Everything seems to be pointing that direction. So these are just pictures of that were in the file there, and they show models. I think ideas they were working out. The firm and Mendelssohn were working out. Now, this shows the garage. In the final product, they eliminated anything. You parked on the street, when you saw that one picture of the flat top, there were no cars. Most of the time, family only had one car, and that was when the base working, And so kind of the modernists, always would never put their commercial in with the residential. And so in this case, and the community building was the largest building in the whole structure of the community. What they put that in the middle, and then you had the trailer park on one side and the flat tops on the other, with this commercial center. It didn't last long. Everybody came in, the bars, strip clubs, but you had some really nice. It was a really vibrant community, and I mean, I look out here and all these people and everybody, we came, and I guess my family came in March of '44, and you just made lifelong friends. I mean, it was one serious kind of wonderful place to live in. And I remember, I don't know if you remember Kay Doherty. It was a couple of days before she died. We were sitting at the table, and I would always pick her brain for this kind of stuff. She lived 2 or 3 days more, but she kind of had, I asked her a question, and she said something about Lexi Park, and she looked up and kind of had a real faraway look. She was tired. lot of fun, you know, and, it was. And anyway, so, this is the, second part of Flat Top. They had part of it. And, you can see the tall ceiling, the big community, the idea of family. This was the biggest room in the house, you know, I don't know if you remember, I always thought the hallways were very narrow and the bedrooms were small. We just had a little tin shower, but, we had a boiler. But anyway, the big complaint about these places were the people couldn't go out and buy curtains. When you had you can see, you know, some people put plywood with us and people. My grandmother, you know, it's a community building, you have the Makers Club. So, you know, you had to make it, get somebody to make it. There's another bathroom. We didn't have a toilet. The kitchen. And again, this is a postcard from 53, and this was Jack Doherty's merchandise on. And this is the building I think you know they needed posts because they couldn't use the steel to make that roof cantilever out what they wanted. And again, you see a lot in Mendelssohn stuff. You see that roof sweep up in his stuff. This little thing to me was a giveaway that he had done this building. And we'll sweep up the hand. Now, this is the barracks I was showing you. There was two of them, and one was male and one was female. And let's see. The other ones over here, they were symmetric, they were the same. If you were married, your wife stayed in one and husband stayed in the other. Hey, Jack Hardy, there one, they didn't stay long and someplace else. But anyway, so this is right standing at the sidewalk. You will remember this as this. If you look, the barracks are still there. And one, and here's the other one. See these three windows? They've got some symmetry right here. So there's a barracks and a barracks. Now, 1948, Phil Gray bought, you know, this was at the same time the Tulagi Place was being deaccessioned. The Navy sold the Tulagi Place to the Whitlocks, and Phil Gray bought these two barracks. Now, what Phil did was he put now remember, we're still going to the movies over at the community center, and then later at the parks again, at Quonset. So Phil, I guess about 52, maybe 51, 52. He put the plaza in the middle, in that hole between the barracks, right here in the plaza. And then he tore everything down out of the first floor of the two barracks and put retail. So if the office to the hotel was here, if you got a room number that happened to be over here, you had to walk down and go in that entrance. Okay, and so and then your merchants. There was a drugstore here, I think Alan Velocity had it, and then later I think there was a fire, Parkman shop and Pink Shoes were over by where I remember Peking restaurant, and there was a fire, and of course, and they left and they relocated to just another picture. Little diner, I Skeeter, which is a little diner that they later moved to where the Air Museum is now, and then the Sunset Manor came in there. And this became the hub. Now, this is a very early picture. And I put this in to show you that building that I think Mendelssohn did was freestanding. There was no grocery store. There was no A&P. But what happened was Hiram Millison was the base when he was evicted. Hiram Millison only owned 5/8 of an acre. He had a bar and he had a store on it. Did have a little cottage down in Wilson Landing, but that's all the property Hiram Millison had. So he immediately took his money out and he bought 34 acres right here. And he didn't take very long to build this and see the bus here, Greyhound bus station. This is where my grandmother used to go and get her numbers. And so, and of course, slot machines. Now, you guys, this area, do you remember Ed Florence? And he had that gas station. Gas station's still there. It's a pizza place now. But Pat's Bar and the other Millison complex would have been right in here. But anyway, that's probably the first outside building in the park. And so, Lexington Park is a very early attempt to have a planned community. All the things that Con and Jacobs built into that are smart growth concepts that are used today. Walk to the floor. Have your house kind of have a relationship with the outdoors. Lots of community, and that's one of the things that always stands out. That little town, it had a sense of community, and for a while, one of their goals, the architect's goals, was for they didn't, there wasn't racial, so to speak. They did have social, because even at the 1950 census, you still see when people come in Town Creek, people moved out, but in the 50 census, you can still see where the head engineer was right next to the butcher and the commissary, then it disappeared. The concept that the modernists came there. And the other thing is, this is one of the rare examples of modernism in rural settings in the country. And it's part of the Navy's history. Anyway, I don't think I missed it. Any questions from anybody? Yes, sir.
What did the annex West Field come into?
Can you repeat the question with the?
Where does the annex at Webster Field? Okay, well, good. This has to do with, if you're passing around that book base that we did, in the archives up in College Park. At College Park handles military stuff. There's a file or a box in every naval installation that Webster Field, Solomon, the Navy came in and condemned it. Webster Field's an easy one because it's all Jesuit. But it has every picture and description of every structure that was on there. Same way with Solomon's, Piney Point, all those things. There's a file on any time, and when they bought it, and then when they de-accessioned. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of pictures, the base in the park. Yes, sir.
You may have said something about, but when exactly, like, park, the name, like, park, come about? Is that in the late 40s?
Well, no, I think it came with these guys, with Convict. And going back to my question, somebody said, well, how come we never heard this? Well, because things got really good from that. This was the last project. Eric Mendelson and Elsa Doni, she went to DC. Mendelson didn't like New York at all. He immediately after Lexington Park, he went to California and the Army paid him to design a German town so they could bomb it. and in the desert somewhere. That was his the next job. And, he ended up being in Israel. But he was, he
named like.
I don't know that he did it, the firm, the name Lexington Park was on the files of Con Jacobs. So it wasn't something that came later. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, the Lexington carrier. Yep. You're on Enterprise Midway. Yep. And so, I think Hudson Mark came 47, and if you worked on the base, you lived in Blacktop, or a merchant who didn't work on the base, you were at the car. Then she said that Lexington Park Elementary was named for that in 1954. I wasn't very thankful. Anybody? Yes, ma'am. Oh, boy, that's a good question. So when we did this book on the Navy base, there's Jarbo'sville, Fordstown, Pearson, So the intersection where the Navy name gave is that Jarvis, considered Jarvis, down in the base. There's the name right there, Craig. That would be Pearson. The little village with Millicent store and Belmotor and all that. That would be considered Pearson. Jarvisville is where the light is, right there. Anybody else? Anything?
So I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm hearing about what Lexington Park used to be. What are the plans now for that particular area? We're hearing that they are doing the road farms and where is that right now?
They're going to tear this down. I just would like to get a little attribution. I think that the people that are going to tear down have to do a thorough architectural review, oral history, and so on.
But it definitely happened.
I think so. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sure. Thank you. So that's where I am right now. And now, when I find out more, but that's where the research is taking us. And on. Thank you.
Well, here's our plan. Please don't go away. We're going to take a 5-7 minute break. We have a wonderful array of refreshments. And then please let's come back to what we're calling our open mic session, where hopefully many of you can talk about your personal experiences or your family's experiences here. And since she's not here yet, let me say that we're expecting Linda to come. And, Linda Paczynski's been working very hard to figure out how it is that she can just move. And it's not quite that simple. And so we do have something you would like to present to her when she gets here. So please make sure to stay. She said she had to close up the restaurants and that things were really popping today, but she should be here in a minute now. So the enticements are food and beverages, the open mic session, and please help us as a community be able to recognize. And Julie has another comment. I also do have an update from the county in response to the question about what's happening next. And I just wanted to read that for accuracy. As far as an update on the progress of redevelopment, meaning the Royal Farms, gas station and convenience store goes, the major site plan has not yet been submitted. When it is submitted, it will be sent to all review agencies for their approval. That means soils, health, MATCOM, DPW&T, that's Department of Public Works and Transportation, SHA, that's the State Highway Administration, and NASPAC River. Land Use and Growth Management reports, they're the agency, the department responsible for overseeing the development of what will be happening at Tulagi Place. They report it is typical for a permit like this to take 6 to 8 months before it has full approval. But it can go faster if the design professionals are diligent. As far as when to expect demolition, that can, if a developer wants, happen much more quickly and is not subject to the same lengthy span of review. Okay, so there's two different focuses. One is demolition, the other is building. Anybody who wants to know more, folks, we need to address that inquiry directly to Royal Farms. Well, that's the most that we have to offer right now. But our point today is to celebrate the history and all of the life and community, as has been so well pointed out, community in that space. And Julie has something else to say.
I want to say that if everything aligns correctly based on what happened this summer, that there should be funding to do oral histories. And also to record the bills. I mean, we don't know because everything's limbo. But if you aren't able to speak today and you check off the box, somebody who would do the oral history would be in touch.
For that, I'm going to ask Linda Polczynski to come here for just a minute. Linda? Sit down. I need you to come here. Well, we want to talk about the past, and there's the past and the past, and the past. We also want to talk about community and so many ways that Tulagi Place has been a base for community. And we all know that one way which Tulagi has continued to be a place for community has been because of Linda's Cafe. And so before we go into the past, for the past, Linda, who in the present has to clean things up and close up the restaurant, would you please come forward for just a minute, please?
Thank you.
So in recognition of Linda, not just because she did community, but because she has created a base for our community, we'd like to present you with this plaque that says, "Thank you for Linda's Cafe, a treasured place for building community for 35 plus years." Some people have to say something, you're welcome to.
This is really beautiful. I didn't expect this at all. I've been on Tulagi Place for 35 years at my cafe. And it's been the place where everybody meets. You can walk in there at any time and see retirees, new people at the counter, or sitting out there talking to meeting people, asking where to go, who to go see, who this and that. And it's been really a true honor. I was there when the cave was open and there was no soup kitchen. I used to give my food out every afternoon at 3 o'clock. I fed the people who hung out at food left and whoever needed. That was before the sisters started, before any of the soup kitchen. I gave out food. And I have people to this day who come up to me and thank me for feeding their family when they were there. And it's been a true honor. And people talk about Lexington Park, Tulagi Place, and I get so mad because I grew up in Patuxent homes. I had no problems. I have no problems at that cafe. It's no different than if you go to Walmart or somewhere and people panhandle. We have no problems. Knock on wood, I've never had a break yet. I'm in there every morning at 5:30. And with all this, on 7 days a week, now 5 since the pandemic. But people put us down all the time. And that really upset me. I heard that they're gonna be decorating Great Mills Road for Christmas. We were left out because we're not on Great Mills Road. We're on Tulagi. Tried for a long time to get that place together and decorate it, the people down there. But there's not that much help to do that. Now, we're gonna be shoved aside to a chicken farm. And I'm so against that place, not because the landlord does not have the right to sell her property. I understand that. But that corner is gonna be a disaster. I see it every morning. I see it when I leave every day. When they did a traffic pattern for planning commission, they wasted their money. They should have asked me what goes on there at 5:30 in the morning. I could have told you everything. But instead, they're gonna destroy that. And once that goes, we have nothing left of Lexington Park. Nothing. My God, I can remember Ben Franklin. I can remember Stinger the Sewing Center. I remember everything there when I moved to this area. My parents were in the military in 1962. And I left like everybody who graduated from high school and came back. And I love Lexington Park and my friends in it. And for me to have to pick up and leave, nobody understands. You don't pick up a restaurant and move it. It takes a lot more than that. It takes a lot of money. But I appreciate everybody who comes to the restaurant. And I will not close. That is my blood. I will stay there until I go. Because I have how much I love the community. I want to thank you. This was a real honor. And thank you. I see a lot of customers there. And I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
So you can see the minute somebody who has lived here for decades begins to speak, another memory comes bubbling up. And so those are the memories that we want to hear the beginning of today. This does not have to be the end. As Julie King had said, if you have other thoughts, people who are here and people who are online now or in the future that you would like to share, we would love to find ways to capture those memories. So we're going to start with, we actually have 2 people in the room who were on the original committee to think about how to design the Tulagi Place area. We have Elfrida Mathis here and we have Alonzo Gaskin here, and they were both part of that process. Don't look at me like that, Alonzo. You're part of that process. We'd like to hear, he hasn't volunteered to speak yet, but Elfrida would like to share some thoughts with us. And then we'll start with the people who are on this list. But we really hope that as you hear somebody mention something, you go, oh, yeah, I remember that. And let's really use this to celebrate some beautiful memories, community time. This is be a positive gathering when we can just enjoy being here together. So do we have a microphone for Elfrida Mathis? And Amy, can we have people typing things into the chat box who are watching?
I don't have any.
You don't have any. Elfrida, you can sit right there or you can come here. Would you like some here? You don't, then you don't. No.
I was asked to speak, and I was determined that I was going to talk and make sure you understood that when I was born in 1945 in St. Mary's County, in Valley Mead, delivered by Dr. Beaton, there were 2 St. Mary's Counties. My father from Closet, Arkansas, and he was mentioned earlier. And my father wanted to move to California. My mother basically said over her dead body, she wasn't leaving St. Louis County for anything, come hell or high water. He was a World War II veteran. He never made it to big time service because he got sick and had ulcerated stomach and all that. But he ended up in St. Mary's around, just before I was born. But he did get her to Little Rock, Arkansas, where she studied to be a beautician. And later on, she used that skill in Carver. So I'm getting to that story. My dad worked on base, and because he worked on base, he was able to rent an apartment, one of the homes in Carver Heights, which were pretty much replicas of the area further up, the flat tops. Now, the Carver Heights cold storage was as soon as you walked in the door to your right or to your left. Well, I saw that the cold storage in the flat tops was on the outside. Eventually, coal went away and we got permits. It was absolutely a wonderful place to raise children. It was wonderful. I attribute that to the United States military. I don't think I'd be standing here in good health or good sense or whatever that I gained as a citizen of St. Mary's County when I've been for the United States military at Pax River. The Tulagi Place is the perfect example of what I speak of. Now, anybody that remembers Tulagi Place, I see my dad came out of Crossett, Arkansas. So when we went to visit, it was colored people over here and white folks over there, and even in St. Mary's County. I went up the side, the little outdoor stairs to the movie theater in Leonardtown. Couldn't go to the plaza. Anything that county people had their hands on, it excluded people. The longing phase, while the military created two separate communities, one for Black folks and one for white folks, those communities were wonderful. And they were wonderfully alike. They didn't disregard people because of the color of their skin. We had, now, St. Louis County has built multiple neighborhoods, no sidewalks, and no. And if you the Black House, there were sidewalks and there was outdoor lighting. Now the kids play in the streets here, walk on like the rest of the citizens. Walk down the street. But then they took care of the people. It was 1948 when the military was being desegregated nationally. And I think we just fell in line. When I went to Tulagi Place as a little kid, I went to the AMP. Now I'm gonna take you down the walkway that's in my brain. There was the AMP grocery store. Next to that was the Five and Dime. Next to that was the drugstore. Down a little further was the style center. Was a place that you went and ladies went and bought dresses and things. Nobody told us that we couldn't try the dresses on. Nobody told us that we had to wait until somebody else that just walked in the place got waited on. We went to Beats. Now I heard young man say Beats was on the other side. When I came through, which had to be about after 1950. East was over there. And they had a little shoe machine where you got wanted to put in. They had, I mean, it was wonderful. Then on the end was the hub. Now you would have thought that man was a little weird, but if you knew him, he ran around behind everybody. And every time you put your hands on something, he was right there to fold it back up and put it back on the shelf. And you all know what I'm talking about if you went into the hub. So I could think, well, maybe, but no, I observed him. He was okay. He did that to everybody that came in the store. But you walk right across the street to the new Plaza Theater. Couldn't go in there. Now, what was that all about? Okay, so I had Tuesday Mary's County. In Culver Heights was the most glorious upbringing that I could have had. Now, my parents moved from my grandparents' farmhouse in Valley Lake, which was a wonderful place. But at that time, they didn't have running water. But I never knew it because they took care of me quite nicely as I was coming along. And they had a tobacco farm, tobacco and corn. And they had a big garden area. It was just wonderful. When we moved to Culver Heights had the community center. And Mr. Colson ran that. And his wife was blind. And his daughter was, I think, a Howard graduate. But Mr. Colson had, when you walk in, they talked about the churches. First Missionary Baptist Church, which is First Baptist Church, that is original development in that USO building. There was a barber shop there. Mr. Sylvester Barnes was running that early on. There was a little recreation center to the side with a library and where kids came to play games. Somehow I was known as the checker champion of the neighborhood. And once in a while you have kids come in from out of town. And they would come and get me to play checkers. So I could beat them up and go home. But we played hopscotch. We had activities in the woods, blueberries, blackberry picking, inkberries, they were poisonous. You could bust them and try to put them in a pen or something to write them. The neighborhood had the most glorious, updated playground that you could find anywhere in these United States. And we were organized. You ever heard of kids going to the playground and lining up behind the swings? So it would be no trouble with somebody trying to bully other people. Because if you weren't in that line, you couldn't swing. So we would all jump out. We had a little game called Bail Out. And then we went through the pet machine. People on both sides had to go down the middle and bend over. And if you were the last one out of that swing, see, you were it. So we were organized in the schools, Jarvisville was an old barracks of people that were housed there when building Paxton. That was our school. I started, my sister Janice, I started out at St. Peter Claver. We were glad to get out of there because we had to go to the bathroom down at the graveyard. And so my mother suggested we should visit the public school, and that was it. And because they had indoor water fountains and bathrooms. But that school, they had their proms at the USO building. The USO building was the Y'all can say it with me, community center. It was our community. It had church, had dances, it had library in it, it had activities, and a little young sailor worked with young kids and set up the first teen center. So at one point, it was a teen center. So I wanted to tell you all about Culver Heights. And Culver Heights was a replica of the flat top. It replicated it in every way. And we were luckier because we didn't have all those people coming in and out of the community building. That community building at the flat tops was right across from right on Tulagi Place. It was right across the street from the BMP and all those stores. So first of all, I want to thank, I started growth. I came home and became a school teacher. Every time the school board opened their mouths, they compared us with some. We had nothing. According to them, we still don't have any money, nothing. Now y'all saw the data. Did that show that singers don't have anything, period? But every time you hear from the people running things, and we still equal to Somerset County, we are not. Now, my wish is, since we are not bright enough, or guess not we, but some people, to line out a history that once it's gone, it can never be returned. Is to figure out how we can adopt someplace. I already have it figured out. Now I think I'm a lawyer, but I'm not. But I'm really put stuff out in the street that I hadn't thought about. So I think we should go down here on where the old flat tops used to be, that area facing the old 235, where the Japanese plants flowers are, bushes are. And we should build a welcome center there. Because where's our welcome center was the closest one? Charlotte Hall. And by the time they finished fooling around at St. Mary's, at historical St. Mary's City, don't you think we might need another welcome center on the way to St. Mary's City and whatever? And in that welcome center, we should create the imagery of Tulagi Place so that we will not get it. So when you act, so let me see, I had a little statement here. The young lady is walking towards me to say, it's time to sit down. And I must have not have it, but it goes like this. How many people in this room are over 77 years old? Raise your hand. Okay. Now, you're the only ones that can tell me that you didn't think. So, thank you for letting me. And I was blessed to have got the results of what Pax River, partly because the government was telling them they had stuff to do with regard to treating everybody equally. So I remember Tulagi Place, and it was special. I never felt other things that I felt. But they didn't break me because I was not going to be the things that were presented to me. I was going to be someone else. And I accomplished that. Thank you.
anybody else just want to spend about 3 or 4 hours just listening. Yeah, no, it's terrible. They have to, there's a lot more to come, and that's, we'll consider that a teaser, right? Afraid I hope you have a lot more to tell us on another occasion. I just want to make sure before the library closes that we get that we can hear from as many voices as possible. So I'm wondering whether if the microphone were to go over to Pat Cole or to Tiny Taylor, we could hear anything from them.
Hello, I'm Pat Cole, and I feel like I love that we arrived like at 09 February 5th, 1958, 64 years ago, and opened a high store. There surely still exists now. I don't know if anybody remembers it. Trailer Park was across the street from us. We moved into Production Park. It was a wonderful place to be. We had sidewalks, babies up and down, and all the streets were named after battleships, and that was amazing to me. So that was an education, and we were in at the high store dipping ice cream cones, nickel a cone, 2 dips for 10 cents, and then we moved after we had a lease with Ivan Millicent. And then we bought property where we moved our high store on Shangri-La Drive. And then it became, my son operated it as Hal, and we opened Cole Travel. So we've been in business in Lexington Park for 64 years. And I want to thank everyone for supporting us. And it's been a great experience. And I'll have to tell one story. My daughter loves St. Mary's County too. She came home from Park Hall School in the 4th grade. She said, "Mom, I want to be a teacher." And that child is now teaching at Great Mills High School. And she's been there, oh gosh, I think she's 55 now. But anyway, she's been there a long time and she loves it and we love it. Thank you all for supporting us in Lexington Park. That's right, and we belong to the Homemakers Club, and
We did, and I'm Connie Taylor. I started work in 1942 at the Tuxedo River. I can remember when dirt was being overturned runways in Robot Park. My first job was supply. The next job I had was at the armament test. And I looked at the window and I saw this beautiful black sod. Having been lived on the farm, I knew what the first looked like. Should be tobacco on this, and now I'm turning it over and putting cement on top of it. And I thought it was terrible. But anyway, it's a lifesaver to everyone in the county. It's a meaningful thing. It's been wonderful to us. My husband and I started Taylor Gas Company in 1949, 50, and we're still in existence. Great Mills Road. We thank everybody for supporting it. Getting to Linda. Really, and she's been especially good to me. Very good to my husband and my family. And then please don't go. Like, we won't let you. Thanks.
Well, I think this is kind of forced on me. I said, well, I really don't have anything to say, but I just remember from St. Mary's County, well, I was born and raised here in Galilee. I'm first cousin to Janice and Alfreda, and I live right in back of the farm that Alfreda was talking about in the woods. And my remembrance of Lexington Park since I, left here, probably in, I was away for about 30 years and I moved back in 2000. And I, lived in California and Hawaii and different places. But I had an opportunity and decided to come back home to live in St. Louis County, and I really loved it. My mom was still alive when I moved back. And I came back and then she got sick, so I decided to stay. First, I was only gonna be here for a few weeks and go back to California, but she got sick and I decided to stay. But from Lexington Park, I basically remember only a few things. The little man at Hubs that wouldn't seem to me that he frowned on anything at all. He touched, I mean, he touched it. He's just a hyper person. I think he needed a few guilts. And the class of theater, I remember that. And I can remember I thought that we sat upstairs and although that was the park. You go upstairs and then you put the popcorn down. On the folks downstairs, but I did have the opportunity to work a little bit on the base as a housekeeper for a little while before I left. And now I came back and worked as a registered nurse at the health department. Fortunately, I retired a few years ago. Otherwise, I would be working with COVID. Thank goodness. I was blessed. But St. Louis County is wonderful, and so is Lexington Park. And I need to see it go away because I have special memories of it as well. Thank you for the opportunity. And just to mention, my father, Leroy Thompson, and he did have slot machines before James Franklin. He was appointed as supervisor of elections by a couple of the governors in St. Louis County. So he did work a lot in the community and the Cedar language and all that. So we have good experiences here. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I've been here for about, I guess, 25 years. I'm not originally from St. Louis County, but it was a great place to raise my kids. And the hub is where my church currently resides, away from the big Christian church in Nashville. I just want to say, okay, I'm kind of glad we are moving. However, I will miss that building. You say it takes a village to raise a family. I can surely enough to that because it took a village to raise my kids. It was a lot of help to see God again in my life. Well, should I accept him again in my life and away from the victory? And I see a lot of things happen in that building. So I definitely know when this kind of thing is going to be missed, as well as the oasis of Victory Christian Church is going to be missed. My pastor, James Spence, is a pillar in the community as well. I'm just representing church today. So prayerfully, we don't have any for the other community. It won't be like the other, but I'm pretty sure once we start putting out where we're going to be able to set the people still continuing to come, as well as your establishments. So I wish you well. Pretty much.
Next. I'm wandering toward Janice Wallflower unless somebody along here. Yes, please. What's your name? Say your name.
Richard Cauliflower.
Uh-huh.
It was a flat house, but it's 3 years old, like before. Then in the county, ever since I came to I was 3 months old. I was going down and Mr. Bradley, was a fisher. Friendly MP, he generally got far on Friday night, all the chocolate. My mother later on worked at the Joy shop, which was what it is now. One thing I remember is the Hub, Joy shop, and Pete's were the only stores in St. Louis County that had slot machines. They were just good time, Frank Knox. I would say I went from first grade back to kindergarten all the way through high school with the same classmates. They grew up in Flat House. It was like one big family. Children raised by that. A real experience. I was blessed to have that power.
Well, I just want to say one more thing, what was, Alfreda said about a welcome center, if we're gonna be demolished. Would be fantastic, and I'll tell you why. I can't tell you how many people, especially now that the holidays are coming to the restaurant, they grew up in this area, they left, they moved with the military, and they bring their kids, and they walk down the flat tops, and to show them where they used to live. There should be a giant map somewhere with all the houses numbered. This goes on all the time. And once that's gone, we won't have nothing to say this is our home anymore, but they do come to this area, and I can attest to it all the time. And so I think we get demolished or welcome center. Again, you don't have to go to Washington to see the cherry blossoms. We've got them right now. The most beautiful cherry blossoms around. So anyway, let's one of the
Get about the past of the picture in down on the park. Where the park is at now, my trails in here, and taking out all the street. It would be very easy to put that Tom McCourt, Labor Ave, Carl, the next, and Renell. Are they doing that?
I gave one.
Oh, why they took that?
No, I took one down and gave it to Save.
You see,
And gave it to, yeah. But I gave it back to them, and they're gonna make copies and put them back.
we write like that.
Okay, we say make sure to on because the street signs that you would get in the flat tops are to go back into Lexington Manor past the park. So that they would be markers of where those streets were, and markers, as Linda has said, of what the history is in the park. That's interesting.
I feel is beautiful and paint.
So we have recordings that the bike trail is beautiful. Lexington Manor past the park is lovely. Yes. Okay, anybody before the Janice, what else? Going? Yeah. Thank you, Marge. And we have you, as I said, I was actually in this. The NAACP, and one of the things that we always talk about is systemic change. You know, looking at the system over time, we know that those builders come on and the architects have talked about, they built with a sense of community, town greens, community centers. You know, those kinds of things were part of that, of their architect. So it's somehow, I think, they talk about street lights, sidewalks. We've lost that system of community, which we knew Tulagi Place had. So, and we know that we are very concerned about the Royal Farms being there because, of course, UCAC has a monument, was the county's monument, but we're going to get gas, fuel, and fumes and those kinds of things. So, I don't know about you all sitting in this room, but I think I gave a whole lot of thought to county ordinances. That we all have the rights and the responsibility, when we see things like this, to go to the commissioners about what is the ordinance for this rule. Many communities across the state and nation have an ordinance that says you cannot build a gas station near a park or a church or a school. We don't have that in St. Mary's County. And we're not paying attention. I know I was not, till this count comes up and then you say, well, what could have been done? What could we do? Because we're just kind of, you know, we have them everywhere now, but maybe for the future, because that's what this is all about. As Elvira said, many of us are 70s, but we still have children, grandchildren, nieces, and nephews, and building that
that community is going to so important. You know why? We're very divided. Very divided, but here in St. Mary's County, so coming together with community unity is important. So on January 31st is the next public hearing for the county commissioners. That's where we all have an opportunity to go and speak. And they present, hopefully, let's get an ordinance to stop this type of building, putting these gas stations, these things harmful to our community, near our children at our schools. So those are so important. Also, policies for micropolitan areas. You know that Lexington Park is a micropolitan area. That's a mini city. You go on the chart that we put up to starting from what, 100,000, hundreds of people to well over 100,000 people. And Lexington Park is a city, you might as well say. So we have no representation. We're working on that as well. But the whole idea is if you're in a micropolitan area, shouldn't there be some kind of policies for Lexington Park in terms of development and what should go within the community? So that's another thing. That's the commissioner's issue too. It's the issue we bring to them, and we bring it to them as a community because we would like to see systemic change. The wealth gap. We lost all these farms. I looked at that list that you passed them out. I knew these people. I grew up. I said, oh, this is so-and-so. I know, they were, of course, older, but I didn't know they owned land on the base and who these folks were. So, those kinds of things that are our responsibility if we know. This kind of project just brings it all to life. Everyone sitting in this room, look around the areas like Lexington Park, the people up north talked about, they got, they made out. We didn't. But again, so keep that in mind. The 31st of January, keep in mind civic change for our children, getting involved. And I think that this project has really lit a fire under many of us. And I'd like to thank Marsha. I call her Little Marsha for just continuing to take this on and keep the fire going. Thank you, Marsha. For being in the room.
Okay, so, miraculously, it is 4:00. Exactly 4:00. So I want to tell you, I work at Pittsburgh, right? That's that day's making sure this will work. Thank you, everybody who is here today. Thank you for the people who helped to organize this. That includes Julie Randall, Julie King, Linda Palczynski, Janice Waldauer. Thank you again to our speakers, to Julie Cook, and to Julie King, John Cook. My goodness, why is it? Please, and thank you to Amy as not only a co-sponsor, but for setting all this up and suggesting the library we hosted. Obviously, when we do talk about community, what I'm hearing is that space is where the library was. That space now is still where the Newtown Players are, where the theater is. That space is still community space in terms of the UCAC and the Juneteenth celebrations, and a space that has meaning for the community. That area has now Lexington Manor Passive Park, which has some beautiful attributes that didn't call for something, and the bicycle paths, and of course, those magnificent cherry trees that Vicky Vogue rediscovered for us, decided they needed to be really appreciated and added to, in fact. So what makes space community is the community is there. So I'm hopeful that not only the people here, but people who have been watching online, anybody who may watch this in the future, and I encourage you all to share this, because now it's on the record. And so many other people ought to be able to hear the presentations that Julie and Johnny had for us. And thank you for the memories that so many of you have shared. Stay tuned, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.